In Python, we have the if, elif, and else statements for decision making. Using these statements, Python evaluates expressions and runs a piece of code accordingly, meaning if an expression is evaluated as Boolean true, then the code indented below the if statement will be executed. Otherwise, Python goes further and evaluates elif or else statements, if any. Unlike many other programming languages that use curly braces or other delimiters, Python uses indentation to define code blocks, meaning if, for, and while statements, functions, or classes. Using indentation means that white spaces are used as delimiters for code blocks, and here I am referring to both space characters, usually 4 of them, and the tab key. We are going to see that from now on in the course. Just remember that you should stick with a convention for using indentation and not mix spaces and tabs within your code. We are going to use the tab key each time we want to indent some piece of code. I think this is the safest way to do it. Another thing to remember is that after every if, for, or while statement, or function, or class definition, you must use a colon so that Python will know that it should expect an indented block after that statement. Don't worry, you will easily get used to Python's way of writing code. Now let's start working with if, elif, and else statements. Let's say we define a variable x equals to 10, and we want to make a decision based on that variable's value. Maybe the value will change at some point and we want to handle that change in some way. Let's use the if statement to execute a block of code if the expression we provide will be evaluated as true. So, if x greater than 5, colon, print x is greater than 5. Okay, now let's stop for a moment and see what we have here. First, I typed the if keyword, then the expression I want to evaluate, so x greater than 5, and then a colon. Being in the Python interpreter, you can see that Python recognizes that a block of code is expected, so it will show the 3 dots we have already seen when printing on multiple lines in the string section. At this point, I hit the tab key, so the code I want to execute if that expression is evaluated as true will be associated with the if statement above. Finally, I wrote that the program should print a string if x is greater than 5, and then hit enter twice. And of course, since 10 is greater than 5, it printed the user-defined string. Good. Now, what if x would have been equal to 4? Let's test this. So x equals 4. Now, if x greater than 5, print x is greater than 5. As expected, our if block does not return anything, since 4 is not greater than 5. As a tip, you can use the up arrow key to avoid typing the commands again. Okay. So what happened here from Python's point of view? It's simple. Python evaluated the x greater than 5 expression. When we define x as being equal to 4, the expression will be evaluated as false. We can check that in the interpreter. So x greater than 5 returns false. If Python evaluates the expression as true, it will execute the indented code below the if statement. Otherwise, it will skip it and move on with the rest of the code. Now, what if you want to handle multiple cases? Let's say you want something to be printed out regardless of the true or false result of the evaluation. Then you will use the elif or else statements. First, let's see how to use else and return to our variable x, which is still equal to 4. Let's print x is greater than 5 if x is indeed greater than 5, and x is not greater than 5 in any other case. This will be accomplished in the following way. So if x is greater than 5, let me use the up arrow key, print, OK. Now else, a colon, and let's say print x is not greater than 5. OK, so to specify the else statement, you must hit enter after print x is greater than 5. Then type the else keyword, followed by a colon and an enter. Now for the code to be executed if x is not greater than 5, you should hit the tab key and thus indent another block of code. In our case, we want to print x is not greater than 5. See how that works? For every block of code we want to be executed, we must use indentation. The else statement is used to cover all other cases which are not covered by the if statement above it. So if the expression following the if keyword is true, the indented code below it will be executed. Otherwise, if it's evaluated as false, the indented code below else is executed. But what if we want to be more granular and specify more cases and possible outputs in our program? Then we could use an elif statement like this. Let's say we want to print x is greater than 5 if x is indeed greater than 5. Then print x is equal to 5 if our x variable will have the value 5 at some point. And finally, x is less than 5 for all other cases. We can add the elif statement in between if and else. Remember that else should always be the last statement. So let's set x equals to 5 and modify our if else block. So let's use the up arrow key. Okay, print x is greater than 5. Now let's type the elif statement. So elif x equals 5. Print x is 5. And finally else print x is not greater than 5. So the syntax for elif is similar to the syntax of the if statement. Notice that when evaluating equality between two operators, we use two equal signs because this is not an assignment operation like x equals 5 at the beginning of our example. As a rule, keep in mind that elif and else statements are optional, so you can just have an if statement, evaluate an expression, and execute some code or not without covering other cases. You can have as many elif statements as you want after an if statement, but remember that there can be only one else statement at the end, covering all cases uncovered by the if and elif statements. Another thing here is that there may be more than one evaluated expression after the if keyword, and more than one line of code inside the elif and else blocks. So let's see an example. We know that the value of x is 5, and Python identified x as an integer due to this assignment. So if we check that type of x is integer, Python should return true. So we have x equals 5. This is true. And type of x is int, also returns true. So we have two expressions evaluated as true. Let's use them inside an if block. To check if both expressions are true, we will use the AND logical operator. To execute some code if at least one of the expressions is evaluated as true, we will use the OR logical operator. So we have x equals 5, true, okay. If x equals 5 and type of x is int, then a colon, let's use print x is greater then 5. Let's also print x. Then let's insert an elif statement, elif x equals 10 and type of x is int. Print x is an integer but is not equal to 5. Okay. First, notice that we don't have an else statement. That's because it is optional. Secondly, notice Python printed the string in the if block because both expressions are evaluated as true, which leads to a final value of true. So Python executes the indented code below if and exits without checking other expressions below. If the expression in the if statement would have been evaluated as false, then Python would have jumped to the elif statement and then to the next one and maybe to a final else statement until it would find the true expression being evaluated and execute that code over there. Now let's do another test. Let's set x equals to 10. Okay, so this time if x equals 5 and type of x is int, let's use the same string and print x, then the same elif statement and the same print statement associated with this elif. Okay, this is it. In this case, the expression in the if statement is evaluated as false, since we have the AND operator, and one of the operands is evaluated as false, this operand, because now we have x equals 10. Because this is false, Python jumps to the next statement, the elif, and the result of evaluating the expression is true, since both x equals 10 and type of x is int are true expressions. For this reason, Python executes the indented code below the elif statement as expected. But what if neither expression is evaluated as true and we don't have an else statement to cover all other cases? Let's see. Let's set x equals to 100. Now let's use the same code that is above, so let's use the up arrow key. Okay. Print x. Now the elif statement and the final print statement. Okay. In this case, Python returns nothing. If we would have had this if elif block inside a larger program, then Python would have jumped to the rest of the code, as if this block was not even present in the code. So, remember that Python handles if elif else blocks in order from top to bottom until it evaluates an expression as true. As soon as it finds it, it executes the indented code below it and jumps outside the block to the rest of the code without evaluating other elif or else statements.